The person you loved never existed. You didn't fall for reality, you fell for a ghost wearing borrowed skin. In this video, you will get a ruthless method for telling the difference between a real human being and an empty projection.
You know the moment I'm talking about. 3 in the morning, phone in your hand, scrolling back through a conversation that ended weeks ago, looking for the exact sentence where it all went wrong. You won't find it. It isn't in the messages. The person you loved never existed. Not the way you think. You didn't fall for a lie exactly. You fell for something quieter than that. Something you built with your own hands and then forgot you built. There's a reason this hurt more than it should have, and it isn't the reason you've been telling your friends. You remember the eyes that seemed to understand you before you said a word. The voice that felt like coming home after a war you never named out loud. Hold on to that memory for a second, because by the end of this you're going to look at it differently and you might not like what you see. When the mask slipped, when the text got shorter, when the warmth cooled into static, when the person underneath finally stood up and showed you who they'd been the whole time, you didn't just lose a partner. Something bigger than a relationship went down. You watched a god die and no one around you understood why that phrase doesn't feel dramatic to you. It feels accurate. Friends told you it's just a breakup, and something in you wanted to scream, because it never felt like just a breakup. It felt like a private religion collapsing, one you built with your own hands and worshipped in silence and now have to bury alone. Here's the part I need you to actually sit with, not skim past. Somewhere right now you are doing this again, or you're about to. In about 3 weeks, maybe less, you'll catch yourself rereading a text from someone new, hunting for a hidden meaning that isn't there, and you'll call it a feeling instead of what it actually is. By the end of this, you'll understand the mechanism behind that feeling in cold, exact terms, not comforting clichés. And you'll walk away with something more useful than insight, a method. Not a feeling. A method for telling the difference between a real person and a ghost wearing borrowed skin. Ask yourself honestly, before you go any further, how many times have you been certain, and how many of those certainties actually survived contact with time? Think of the last 3 people you were sure about, not the ones who worked out, the ones you were sure about. Count them. That number is the only honest starting point for anything I'm about to tell you. Here's the pattern, stripped of the poetry that usually protects it. You meet someone. Within weeks, sometimes days, you're certain. This one is different. This one finally sees you. But certainty that arrives that fast isn't intuition. It's projection running at full speed, outrunning the evidence, filling in the blanks before there's anything real to fill them with. Your mind doesn't fall in love with evidence. It falls in love with potential, with the story it can tell about a person using only a handful of fragments as building blocks. A text sent at exactly the right hour. A look held a second too long. A joke that landed with precision. Maybe it was a single message at midnight that said more than 3 months of someone else's effort ever did, and you built an entire personality out of that one message. Then spent weeks defending the personality every time the real person failed to match it. Your brain grabs these scraps and builds a whole structure around them. Intelligence, loyalty, depth, a shared future. None of it demonstrated. All of it assumed. This is why the same heartbreak keeps returning wearing different faces. You're not choosing different people. You're running the identical script and just recasting the lead. The cycle has 3 beats, and once you see the shape of it, you won't be able to unsee it. First, you meet someone ordinary, flawed, and inconsistent, a stranger with a full history you know nothing about, and within days your mind gilds them until they become the exception. Then you start editing yourself to match the fantasy you built. You laugh a little louder at the jokes, you forgive the lateness, the vagueness, the small cruelties, the vanishing acts, because the fantasy needs them to stay perfect and you've quietly appointed yourself its bodyguard. Then reality breaks through the gilding. They cancel again, without the guilt they performed the first 3 times. They contradict something they swore was true. In one unguarded moment, they show you exactly who they've been the whole time, and you realize you've spent months arguing with a ghost that never actually behaved the way you imagined it would. That collapse feels like betrayal. It isn't, it's correction. The person didn't change. Your vision of them did, because it was never accurate to begin with. It was a wish wearing someone else's clothes, and reality just stopped agreeing to wear the costume. This is why the grief so often outweighs what actually happened on paper. You're not mourning 8 months of texts and dinners. You're mourning 8 months spent talking to a version of them that only ever existed in your head, and now you have to bury that version alone while everyone around you says, just move on. Notice where this kind of loss actually sits in your body, not in the chest where ordinary sadness lives. Lower, closer to the stomach, closer to shame, because some part of you already knows you built the thing that broke you. And of course you did. You needed it to be true more than you needed it to be accurate. You'll replay the good moments, searching for proof the fantasy was real. You won't find it, because you're searching your own memory instead of their behavior. The good moments were real as sensations. They were never reliable as evidence. Here's the part that should actually unsettle you. Picture it specifically. A wedding 2 years from now, someone else's, and you're at the table alone again, running the same math on a different name, or a birthday you spend rereading old messages from someone you swore you were over. That's not a threat. That's a prediction, and it's accurate unless you understand the mechanism at a structural level, because the wound was never in them. It's in the part of you that keeps needing someone else to be perfect, so you never have to sit alone with what's actually missing in your own life. This isn't a character flaw unique to you. Nearly everyone runs this loop at least once, and plenty of people run it for decades, mistaking the intensity of the fantasy for proof of its accuracy. Watch how the fantasy defends itself in real time, because it will. Inconsistency gets renamed mysterious. Unavailability gets renamed independent. Coldness gets renamed he just needs time to open up. A canceled plan with no real reason gets renamed he's just bad with words, not bad with me. Every red flag gets a softer translation, and you're the one doing the translating, working overtime to keep the story intact. That work is exhausting, even though it rarely feels that way while you're doing it. It feels like devotion. It's actually labor, unpaid, spent defending a version of someone they never agreed to become. The intensity was never the proof. The intensity was the warning. Here's a small test you can run on any relationship, past or current. Take the strongest memory you have of them, the one you replay when you miss them most, and ask what it actually proves. Not what it made you feel, what it proves on its own, stripped of your interpretation. Most of the time, the honest answer is nothing. It proves you were paying close attention to someone who was, at that exact moment, doing something ordinary. The extraordinary part was entirely yours. There's a name for what just happened to you, and once you hear it, you won't be able to unknow it. But before the name, picture this. You're standing in front of a screen in a dark room, except you're also the projector, and you're also the film, and the only person in the theater who doesn't know the movie isn't real is you. You paid for the ticket, you picked the seat. You've been sitting there so long you forgot there was ever a door out. That's closer to what actually happened than anything about their texting habits. Carl Jung called it projection. You take a piece of your own psyche, a desire, a fear, a quality you never let yourself develop, and place it onto another person, then react to them as if that quality genuinely belonged to them all along. You don't perceive people. You construct them out of your own interior, and then critically, you forget you did the construction. The image feels like it came from outside you. It didn't. Ask yourself something uncomfortable right now. What quality did you decide they had in the first 2 weeks before they'd actually shown you anything? Jung called the buried, undeveloped part of you the shadow, the ambition you were taught to suppress, the softness you were taught to hide, the confidence you were never allowed to claim as your own. When you meet someone who seems to embody exactly what your shadow is missing, you don't see them clearly. You see the missing piece, magnified and gilded, and mistake the reflection for their actual identity. If you feel unlovable, you'll project total devotion onto anyone who shows a flicker of sustained interest. If you feel incomplete, you'll project wholeness onto anyone who seems certain of themselves, even if the certainty is performance. If you feel invisible in your own life, you'll project total understanding onto anyone who simply pays attention to you for longer than a few minutes. None of this was ever about them. It was an inventory of your own hunger, projected outward and mistaken for chemistry. This is why the perfect partner so often turns out, on closer inspection, to be a stranger you barely knew. You weren't in a relationship with a person. You were in a relationship with your own unmet need, wearing a human face and carrying a phone. And here's the part that explains why you couldn't just leave, even when your rational mind already knew better. You knew factually that they were inconsistent, sometimes unkind, often unavailable, and you still felt physically unable to let go. That's because you were never attached to them. You were attached to the image. And the image never argues back. It never disappoints you. It never leaves at 2 a.m. without an explanation. Only the real breathing person does that. So some part of you kept trying to protect the fantasy by refusing to actually look at the human being standing in front of you. This is also why the collapse hits harder than a normal breakup. It isn't just losing a partner. It's a forced look at your own emptiness, the exact hole you were trying to fill by inventing someone perfect enough to fill it for you. The mask didn't crack because they were secretly monstrous. It cracked because a mask always cracks eventually. It was never real skin. It couldn't take the weight of an ordinary Tuesday. Ask yourself one more uncomfortable thing. Whose confidence did you fall for instead of building your own? Whose freedom did you admire instead of claiming any for yourself? One more layer, and I'll keep this one short. Part of what you project isn't just unmet need, it's your own unclaimed qualities. Jung had a word for the specific version that shows up in romance. He called it the anima or animus, an inner image of what you're missing, formed early, mostly unconscious, always looking for a face to land on. When you meet someone whose surface happens to match that inner image, a tone of voice, a certain kind of confidence, the fit feels less like attraction and more like recognition. That feeling is exactly what makes it so convincing. It doesn't feel invented. It feels discovered. It wasn't discovered. It was matched. The way a key gets tried against a lock, it happens to fit. And a key fitting a lock tells you nothing about the person holding it. You built them. And of course you did, because building someone perfect was easier than sitting with the fact that nobody was coming to save you but you. The goal here isn't to stop feeling attraction, and it isn't to go cold. Attraction isn't the enemy. The goal is to stop mistaking your own projection for someone else's actual character, so you can finally see who's standing in front of you. That distinction is the entire difference between love and worship. Love survives contact with reality. Bad moods, inconsistency, unremarkable Tuesdays. Worship doesn't survive anything. It needs distance and mystery and silence to stay alive, which is exactly why so many people sabotage intimacy the moment it threatens to get real. Understanding the mechanism is step one. It won't save you by itself. Insight without a method is just a more articulate way of staying stuck. Interrupting projection takes something colder than self-awareness. It takes a system, because feelings will lie to you with total confidence every single time, and a system won't. Use these three like a scalpel, not a suggestion you'll get to eventually. Method 1. Track patterns, not moments. Words are cheap. A sentence costs nothing to produce and nothing to prove. A promise costs even less. Patterns cost something because they require repetition across time, and repetition is the one thing a fantasy can't fake indefinitely. Stop analyzing what someone says about you. It's nearly worthless. Start logging what they actually do across weeks, not one golden evening that felt like destiny. Keep it simple. Date, action, outcome, nothing else. Strip out your interpretation and leave only the fact. Then ask 3 cold questions whenever you feel the pull to idealize someone off a single interaction. Do their actions match what they said 3 separate times or once, followed by silence and a convenient excuse? When conflict shows up, do they stay in the room, or do they vanish and reappear only when it benefits them? Do they treat you the same when you're useful to them as when you're inconvenient to them? 3 matching moments is something you can actually trust. One cinematic gesture is theater, and theater is built to be believed, not verified. This habit alone will take apart most fantasies within a month, because a fantasy can't survive a spreadsheet. It can only survive vague, unexamined memory. Method 2. Separate the person from the potential. Ask yourself without mercy, am I responding to who this person has actually shown me they are, or to who I believe they could become under different conditions? He's just going through a hard time. She'll open up once she trusts me. Once things settle down, he'll finally show up the way I know he's capable of. Read those back. Everyone describes a hypothetical future, not a fact. You're not in a relationship with a hypothetical. You're considering one with a present tense human being, and the present tense is the only evidence that's ever actually counted. Here's the harder version of the question, and you need to ask it eventually. If this person never changed, not one thing starting now, would you still want them? Not the improved version, this one. If the honest answer is no, you're not in love with a person, you're in love with a renovation project, and you've quietly made yourself the contractor working for free. Method 3, remove yourself from the equation for 72 hours. Projection needs proximity and urgency to survive. It needs constant, fresh material to keep the illusion fed, and it can't survive distance and silence for long because distance starves it of input. When you feel that specific pull, the certainty, the quiet obsession, the compulsion to check your phone every few minutes for a reply that will supposedly settle everything, go dark for 3 full days. No calls, no messages, no scrolling their profile at midnight hunting for clues that were never there. This isn't a punishment aimed at them. It's a test, and it's aimed at you. If they're right for you, they'll survive 3 days of silence. Fantasies rarely do. In the silence, ask one honest question without an audience. Does this ache come from missing a specific quality they've actually shown me, repeatedly? Or from the fear of losing a fantasy I built almost entirely by myself? Most people can't answer this while still in contact, because contact keeps feeding the projection new material, a text, a look, endless small scraps to build on. Distance cuts the supply line and lets the real signal through, unedited. If after 72 hours the admiration still holds up against a factual record of their behavior, that's worth investigating further with your eyes open. If it collapses the second you're not actively constructing it in your own head, you have your answer. It was never about them. Run all 3 together. Track the pattern. Separate the person from the potential. Take the distance when the pull gets loud. Together, they do one job, forcing reality through the fantasy's defenses before the fantasy finishes building its case. A fantasy can't survive sustained scrutiny under any conditions. Only the truth can take that kind of pressure indefinitely. Everything else was always going to collapse. The only question was how long you'd keep paying to prop it up first. Here's what almost no one tells you at the end of a heartbreak, because it doesn't sound comforting on the surface. It's better than comforting. It's true. The end of a projection isn't a loss. It's territory coming back to you. Every ounce of admiration and longing you poured into an imagined version of someone else was never really about them. It was yours, your own capacity for depth, for loyalty, for meaning, loaned out to a stranger who didn't even know they were holding it and couldn't have given it back if they tried. When the illusion breaks, that capacity doesn't vanish. It comes back. The only real question left is what you do with it next. Spend it building another fantasy about the next stranger who catches your eye, or finally turn it toward your own life where it belonged from the start. The people who stop repeating this cycle aren't the ones who stop feeling things deeply. They're the ones who stop outsourcing their wholeness to whoever walks into the room next. They learn to sit with their own emptiness for a while instead of immediately covering it with someone else's face. They learn, usually the hard way, that a person who has to be idealized in order to be tolerated was never actually compatible with them, just convenient for their imagination for a season until reality showed up and made its presence known. This isn't a call to get cynical or shut down. Cynicism is just projection wearing armor. It still isn't seeing the other person clearly. It's just assuming the worst instead of the best. This is a call to precision. Real intimacy doesn't need a mask, and it doesn't collapse the first time someone shows up ordinary instead of extraordinary. It survives full exposure, bad moods, inconsistency, the parts of a person that never make the highlight reel. If you feel for someone can't survive seeing them clearly, in full light, without editing, it was never love. It was casting, and you were the only one auditioning. From here, the standard changes. You don't fall for words anymore. You wait for patterns, logged across time, that either confirm or contradict what someone claims about themselves. You don't fall for potential anymore. You respond to proof, demonstrated and repeated in present tense, and you let potential stay exactly where it belongs, in the category of things not yet earned. You don't need anyone to be a god anymore, because you've stopped needing to worship your way out of your own emptiness. You're learning to fill that space yourself slowly, without a stranger's face pasted over the hole. Picture the next person who catches your eye. Same spark, same pull in your chest. This time you notice it, name it, and wait for the pattern instead of building the temple first and asking questions. Never. That's the whole shift, not less feeling. More proof required before the feeling gets to run your life. The ghosts only ever had power over you because you kept building them a body, night after night, out of your own hope and your own hunger. Stop building, start watching. That's how you take your mind back. Every fantasy you stop building is territory reclaimed. Every pattern you track, instead of ignore, is a small act of ownership over your own perception. Do this enough times and you stop being someone who falls and become someone who chooses, with full knowledge of what they're choosing. None of this makes you numb. If anything, it makes you more available for the real thing, because you're no longer spending your entire emotional budget maintaining a fiction. You'll have more left over for someone who actually earns it in real time, in front of your open eyes, instead of someone you had to construct in the dark just to make the loneliness bearable for a while. That's how you stop falling in love with echoes of yourself and finally become capable of loving someone real.
The ghosts of the past only had power over you because you gave them flesh and blood yourself. Stop building illusions. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and write in the comments if you recognized yourself.